Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Carbondale Branch monthly conversation around voting and election issues. This evening, our topic will be election myths, moments, and musts. And again, these monthly conversations are being sponsored not only by the Carbondale Branch NAACP, but also the Black Graduate Greek Council of Carbondale. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And start the slide. Okay. And just a reminder, everyone, the NAACP is a nonpartisan civil rights advocacy organization. We are not aligned with one political party over another, and we have no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. With the 2022 midterm election just around the corner, I think we're down to like 83 days. It is important, as always, to combat misinformation and get the facts straight about voting. Voting, the basis of a fair and just democracy. And then I wanted to start with a couple of quotes. This one, voting is not right or left, it's right or wrong. Although most myths about voting in these yet to be United States may not spread with deceitful intent, their impact can be harmful, if not devastating. They can lead to lower voter turnout and a less engaged citizenry. Given the responsibility and power that comes with our right to vote, it is on each of us to determine and plan how we can fully participate, for with our right to vote comes many responsibilities. Although I may personally feel like every single vote makes no difference in the grand scheme of things, every vote really does matter. There have been more than a dozen races over the past couple of years determined by a single vote or ending with a tie. So we're going to jump right into voting myths. Voting myth number one, my vote doesn't matter. In 2017, for example, a Virginia House of Delegates race ended in a tie. Out of more than 23,000 votes cast, the deadlock was broken by pure chance, the pulling of a name out of a bowl. And it resulted in a win for Republican David Yancey. This win also gave Republicans control of the state house by, yes, you guessed it, one single vote. So quite literally, a single vote can make a difference. Myth number two, everyone has an equal opportunity to vote. Although the United States Constitution makes it illegal for states to deny the right to vote based on gender and race, this doesn't mean that we're all guaranteed the right to vote or even have an equal opportunity to do so, as we see with the many voter suppression bills that are being passed and considered in states all over the country. In Georgia, in the 2018 election, more than 20 polling stations were closed ahead of the election. And these were closed primarily in counties with higher poverty rates and significant Black populations. Another example in the state of Arizona, More than 500 voters, most of whom were Navajo, were inaccurately placed on a suspension list because the state passed a law that required a fixed address, which doesn't always exist on reservations. Myth number 3. Once I register to vote, I'm set for all future elections. Even if you're registered to vote, even if you register once, under certain circumstances, you can be erased or purged from the system, sometimes even without you knowing it. So it's important to always check your registration status ahead of election day. Because depending on the state that you live in, if you're convicted of a felony without parole, or even if you're ruled mentally incapacitated by a court, you may no longer be able to vote. Additionally, you will likely have to re-register to vote when you move, when you get married, divorce, change your name, when you switch political parties, or sometimes even if you miss voting in a couple of elections, your name can be purged from the list. There have also been multiple instances in which states have inaccurately removed or suspended voters from their active voting lists. Myth number 4, and this seems to be kind of a biggie right now in society. Voter fraud is a big problem in the United States. Not true. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, Americans are more likely to be struck and killed by lightning than to impersonate another voter at the polls. This is also the case for mail-in ballots, which were used extensively in the 2020 election due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, Oregon, the state of Oregon, was one of 5 states that had been already using mail-in ballots for their primary method of voting. The state has encountered essentially negligible fraud, almost non-existent, documenting about a dozen cases of proven fraud out of more than 100 million mail-in ballots since 20,000. Overall, out of 250 million votes cast in the United States over the past 20 years, let me say that again, out of 250 million votes cast in the United States over the past 20 years, there have been fewer than 150 cases of documented alleged voter fraud tied to voting by mail. Myth number 5. The presidential election are the only ones that really matter. While the election ads, the drama, and high stakes of presidential elections make them monumental events, reverberating throughout the course of history, state and local elections have a more direct and immediate impact on our lives. Further, 99% of all elected positions are at the state and local level. Let me repeat that. 99% of all elected positions are at the state and local level. So presidential elections are not the only ones that really matter. We're coming upon an election on November 8th, a midterm election. No president is on the ballot, but the November 8th, 2022 election does matter. Voter turnout rates during the presidential elections, when we come down to the midterm election, only about half of those people vote in the midterm elections, and then only half of them tend to vote in our municipal elections. Even though these elections deal with important issues such as the city budget, school board candidates, the criminal justice system, state legislatures have also historically been more productive than Congress at passing bills, which means that your vote at the state and the local level could lead to more direct results and policies that impact your community for the good or for the bad. From an election and voting standpoint, here are some days that we can use to emphasize or call special attention to the work of voting and elections. September 12th through the 16th will be National Disability Voting Rights Week. September 18th is National Black Voter Registration Day. September 20, and always the third Tuesday during the month of September, is National Voter Registration Day. Then the 19th through the 25th, just take that day and consider the whole week as National Voter Registration Week of Action. October 3rd through the 7th is the National Voter Education Week. And then on October 28th, first day for early voting, is Vote Early Day. Although I would consider voting and election work 24/7, 365 days a year work, there are some days, like holidays, like these dates on the screen now, where we can emphasize with our holidays. For example, we emphasize being thankful for Thanksgiving. We emphasize being in love for Valentine's Day. So let's use these days and put an emphasis around our work on voting and elections. Then here are some important dates. September 29th, we're looking at about a month and a week away, will be the first day for early voting for the November 8th election. And this will be a day that you can vote in Jackson County at the Jackson County Courthouse. On October 11th, that's the last day for regular voter registration. So if you are a deputy registrar, you've gone through that training and you've been deputized, October 11th will be the last day that you can register voters. Then that very next day, that's when the grace period registration begins, and that will begin at the Jackson County Courthouse or at the Carbondale Civic Center. Then October 23rd, that's the last day that individuals can register themselves online. November 3rd is the deadline to request a vote by mail application. And then, of course, with the election on November 8th, November 7th is the last day for early voting. And then this, of course, the main event for 2022, November 8th. That's the date when 34 of our 100 Senate seats, all 435 seats in the United States House of Representatives, 39 of the 50 governorships, and many other state and local officials will be up for re-election. So let's remember this date. However, as in the AACP member, we would encourage you to vote early before this November 8th date. And remember, we can't tell you who to vote for, but we most certainly encourage, beg, plead with you to go and vote. Now let's turn from our election moments or dates, if we will, to look at some election musts. In order to participate in the election, we must register to vote. If you miss those deadlines that we talked about earlier, you can remember to tell your family, your friends, your neighbors. They can always register and vote at the same time, past those deadlines, be it at the Jackson County Courthouse, all the way through the early voting days, all the way through the actual day of election. So it's November 7th. The offices are closed. You can no longer register and vote on November 7th. On November 8th, you can register to vote and vote, not at all the election polls, but you can in Jackson County at the Carbondale Civic Center and at the Jackson County Courthouse. For those of you who may not live in Jackson County, you can register and vote in the state of Illinois at your election authority, wherever that is located in your locality. So, a must. In order to participate, we must register to vote. We should also know our voting status. And you want to do this before the actual election date. Here are some websites that you can get on, and you can check and make sure that you have not been intentionally or unintentionally purged from the voting lists in your locality. So you can go to www. And those of you who are at home and you may need this information, something that I do when I'm at home on webinars, I just pull out my tablet or my phone and take a picture of the screen, and you will have this information to share with your family, friends, and your neighbors. Knowing how to work, never getting up, let's say, knowing how to walk, but never getting up and walking doesn't do us any good. Knowing how to read, but never opening a book, a magazine, or newspaper to read doesn't do us any good. If we know how to walk and we never get up and walk, what's going to happen with our muscles? Our muscles are going to deteriorate to the point that eventually we can't walk. Same is true with voting. Knowing how to register, but never getting up because it's a rainy day, it's a cold day, it's a snowy day. Then we get to the point where we are kind of now, where our country has deteriorated to the point that democracy is not working for all of our citizens. So I would say it's not enough just for you to get up and vote. Not enough for you to say, I voted, I did my part. We have to go above and beyond doing my part and just voting ourselves because of the condition that our country is currently in. So we want to vote. You want to know your voting status. And here again, we got to get out there and we got to vote. When you go shopping, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of times we don't just go shopping by ourselves. What do? We call our buddies and we take our buddies shopping with us. When I've gone to get my nails done, I've seen that a lot of people aren't just going to get a manicure by themselves. They're taking their friends with them and getting a manicure together. So let's do the same with our voting. We're not just going to go and vote ourselves. We're going to take other people with us. And when we do it, it's important that we know our voting rights, that we know the voting rules. You need to know things like, do I need an ID to vote? And if you are a first-time voter, you've just registered to vote in the state of Illinois, there is a possibility that you may need an ID. Then there are those states like our neighboring state of Missouri, where they've recently passed a voter ID law. You do need an ID. It doesn't do us any good to stay home and complain that the law has been passed and we need an ID. If you need an ID, get an ID, get 2 IDs, get whatever it is that you need to go and vote. I said we encourage you to vote early. So you need to know, how do I vote early? Where do I vote early? If you're voting early, all of the polling places, your normal polling place won't be open. So you need to know where you can go and vote early. Sometimes I found as we're registering voters, some people aren't sure even if they can register and vote. Point in case, if you're a convicted felon, and in some states might be the case, not in the state of Illinois. If you're a convicted felon, you've served your time, you can register, you can vote. Even those people who may be, for instance, in the county jail waiting to go to trial, have not been in trial, have not been convicted yet. They're in the county jail. They can vote. The people at the county jail, the sheriff needs to make arrangements so those people can vote. A lot of times people may not tell you what your rights are, so you need to know for yourself. Let's say you're in line, the polls close at 7:00. You're in line when the polls are supposed to close. You're already in line at 7:00. Doesn't matter how long that line is. They have to stay open until the last person who was last at 7:00 is in line has to be given their right to vote. If you make a mistake on your ballot, you don't just turn it in. You can ask for a new ballot. It's okay to make a mistake. If the machines are down at your polling place, you still have the right to vote. So if you're voting and they're just doing it by machine, then you ask for a paper ballot. If your citizenship, criminal record, or other qualifications are questioned, there is an election protection hotline where trained volunteers are there to help and make sure that you can exercise your important right to vote. So we want to register and vote. We want to vote. We want to know what our voting rights are. We want to take action because remember, it's not enough for just me to vote, but we want to educate and engage other people. Talk to your family, your friends, your neighbors about the importance of voting as an act of civic engagement. Share information about the voting process, the right from voter registration to where the polling places are, as well as some of those important dates and deadlines that we talked about. You also, even after the election day, our job as American citizens not over. Those people who win the election, we want to hold them accountable for representing everyone in their district, everyone in their state that they're supposed to represent, not just their base. Share with your family, friends, and neighbors who is on the ballot, what is on the ballot. At your election authority, Jackson County Courthouse, they have sample ballots. A lot of times they're also available on their website. You can get a sample ballot. And yes, you can take it with you, mark it, take it with you when you go and vote on election day or on the early election day. You want to volunteer. It's my understanding in a lot of places, some of the long lines are due to the fact that there's not enough poll watchers or election judges. You can volunteer and be trained to fill some of those positions. Then for those people who are elected on November 8th, you want to educate them on issues that are important to you, that are important to your community, and why those issues are important, and things that you think are important that they can pass or do to help the people that they are elected to represent. As we think in terms of getting engaged, you can also consider running for office yourself. Run for office, address policy issues, and you want to empower others by educating them as well. The NAACP has the Power of Five campaign. And with that, we encourage everyone to do 3 little simple things. 1, register 5 people. 2, volunteer 5 days. Volunteer people who have phone banking and calling people to encourage them to vote. Taking people to the polls to vote. Committing to getting 5 people to the polls to vote. And even as we think in terms of today's high-tech society, we can reach more than 5 people with 1 tweet. We can reach more than 5 family, neighbors, or friends with 1 text. So when we talk in terms of the power of 5, it's something that doesn't have to take a lot of time. But if we think about it in terms of being like compound interest, if I just go myself and register and vote, there's 1. But if I get 5 other people, those 5 people get 5 other people. Those 5 people get 5 other people. Then the numbers compound and we have a bigger turnout. Because it's important when all of our voices, when a diverse voice of citizens' voices are heard, then we have the chance of the democracy working for more people. So it's not enough for you to vote. Right now, we're in the middle of rampant distrust of the governor, distrust of one or both political parties. But for your family, for your friends, for your neighbors, you can be a trusted voice. You can be the best person to talk to your family, friends, or your neighbors about voting and getting them to register and to vote. Now, I'm going to ask everyone who's on right now to do something for me. I need you to take out your phone or take out your tablet. Take out a phone or take out a tablet. And you see this QR code on the screen here. I want you to do 2 things with it. First, I want you to take a picture of it. I'll give you a minute to get a phone or a tablet and take a picture of the QR code. Then after you've taken a picture of it, then I want you to just, still with your camera open, just point your camera towards the QR code. And then you will get a message, a text message that you can touch on, and then it will open up a website for you to register and vote. And so it's just that simple for you to get other people to register and vote. Just use this QR code. You have the picture in your phone. They point their phone to the picture and they can open it up and register themselves and vote. Now, if you are not a deputy registrar, and even if you are with this, when they open this up on their phone or their tablet, then they must put the information in themselves to register themselves to vote. But not being a deputy registrar and having this QR code, we saw with those deadlines, I think maybe it was something like October 11th is the deadline that I, as the deputy registrar, can register people to vote. But I think it said October 23rd was the deadline that people can register themselves online. So with the QR code in your phone, in your pictures, you can let people register themselves all the way through October 23rd. But remember, even if they miss that deadline, on election day, there are places, your election authority, where people can still register on election day, register and vote all at the same time. And one thing with this QR code, as you're thinking of 5 people, doesn't necessarily have to be family, friends, neighbors. You don't have to go out of your way, places where you go. If you go to the gym, you can let people at your gym register themselves. If you're out getting a manicure, maybe it might be a little hard if the nails are wet, but wherever you go, the places that you go, church, your everyday life, so you're not going out of your way to help get more people registered to vote. Now, I think given this QR code, we know as trained deputy registrars, there are some things we can and cannot do as we are registering voters. And with this QR code, you are not registering voters, you're letting voters register themselves. But let's look at a couple of voter registration do's and don'ts. So here, and I'll give you a second to think in terms of, is this a true statement or a false statement? Always treat people equally if they are interested in registering to vote. Would that be a true statement or a false statement? Should we treat Republicans different than we would treat a Democrat? What do you think? We always absolutely want to treat people equally. We're trying to help everyone register themselves to vote because our democracy works better when all voices are heard. So we do want to treat people equally, the same, regardless of race, creed, color, political party, or anything else. True or false? Assist eligible voters filling out or completing their voter registration form. Once they have that QR code and have the form open, can we assist them with filling out or completing their form? Would that be a true or a false statement? Don't. Using that QR code, eligible voters should be filling out their voter registration themselves. We can't take their phone and fill it out for them. They must do it themselves. True or false? Send people to their Secretary of State website. Definitely. The Secretary of State is the election authority for each state. So even better, they can also call or text 866 our vote to speak with a trained election protection volunteer. You don't have to be a voting expert to help people find the resources they need. So you don't have to be a deputy registrar to point people in the right direction, to share the QR code, let them register themselves, point them in the right direction of where they can get a trained election protection volunteer to help them. True or false? Offer people free food or free items in exchange for asking them to use that QR code to register and vote. True or false? Don't. Federal law prohibits this. Even if you have an event and it's providing food, buttons, stickers, or whatever, it must be provided to everyone, voters and non-voters. And we can go back to the first, treat people equally. So you can't provide an incentive for people registering to vote. You can have food or stickers, but it's something that must be for everyone, not just for people who register and vote. Okay, collect paper voter registration forms. Would that be a true or false statement? Should you collect paper voter registration forms? Don't. If you're using the QR code to let people register themselves, there is no paper registration form. There are paper registration forms that people who have been trained and deputized or deputy registrars use. But if you have not been trained and you do not have those forms, you do not collect them. If you use paper forms, follow your state guidelines, including any training or prerequisites mandated by the state, the county, and local voting officials. And in Jackson County, that authority would be our county clerk, who is at the Jackson County Courthouse in Murfreesboro. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a minute. And I'm going to try and pull up a video. I don't know, Jennifer. I should have given you the video. Let's see, where is it?
Just try to open it and then share the screen that it's on.
Okay.
So you'll have to.
I think I closed it down. I had it open and I closed it. Let's see. Bear with me, guys. Okay, I wanted that. Okay, here we go.
This is Morgan Freeman. I know that many of you are wondering how soon you'll be able to hug your friends again, or visit your parents and grandparents without fear.
Can you see that,
I know
Jennifer?
that many of you are eager.
No, I can't see it.
but you hear it, right?
Yeah, it's quite loud, but I can't. Were you sharing your computer sound?
Oh, I need to do that, don't I?
Well, I could hear it. So go ahead when you click share screen. Do you
Share
see?
sound. Yeah.
Okay, and then share sound, and then do you see the? There we go.
Okay. Try this again. Go back.
This is Morgan Freeman. I know that many of you are wondering how soon you'll be able to hug your friends again, or visit your parents and grandparents without fear. I know that many of you are angered by the ongoing racism in our nation and worried about having a job to repay your student loans and afford the basic needs of life. It wasn't long ago that people were beaten and even killed to obtain the sacred power each of you have today, the power to vote. And right now, your vote is more critical than ever. This election is about you and me, your family and my family, our planet, and our democracy in its entirety. With our votes, we, the people, can begin to overwhelm the unjust political and economic systems that favor profits over people, and elect leaders who will take us forward. Brothers and sisters, go vote. Our lives, quite literally, depend on it.
Okay. Ooh.
John Lewis's last words appeared in the New York Times today in an essay that he wrote shortly before his death, intending it to be published on the day of his funeral.
Okay.
Here is that essay, read for us.
Okay. Sorry. It's hard switching back and forth. Thanks for bearing with me. And play from there. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm going to close with two quotes by two former presidents. The first being the 40th President Ronald Reagan, who said, "For this nation to remain true to its principles, we cannot allow any American's vote to be denied, diluted, or defiled. The right to vote is the crown jewel of American liberties, and we will not see its luster diminish." Sadly, it's diminished, President Reagan. The 32nd President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "Nobody will ever deprive the American people of the right to vote, except the American people themselves. And the only way that they could do this is by not voting." So when we don't vote, we are depriving ourselves of the very thing that many people fought and died so that we would have the right to vote. Sources for some of this information down here, former First Lady Michelle Obama's organization When We All Vote and Global Citizens. And then Jennifer, we would be ready for questions.
Great. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box or the chat at the bottom of your screen. It looks like there's one question so far. Don't some poll positions pay a stipend?
They do pay a stipend. I'll tell you, the polls are typically open from 6 to 7. The poll workers have to be there about an hour early. So from 5 to 7, which is what? About a 14-hour day, I think you may get like $150. So that kind of stipend. So it's not a big stipend, I would say. So no one's doing it for the money. They're doing it to serve their community. And as we talk about the last election, for example, and voter irregulations and fraud and cheating, the voting authority at every poll, they are required to have poll workers from both parties. And at the end of the day, those ballots for that poll have to be taken to the election authority in Jackson County, the courthouse. Two people, one from each party, have to ride in the same car together to take those ballots over to the voting authority, thus decreasing the chance that one party would be able to, let's say, cheat or defraud the election. Is that it?
That's it, but I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but how does one become a election official?
In Jackson County, you would actually call the county clerk, and actually they have days that you and different organizations that schedule training, but I'm pretty sure that you can go over to the courthouse, and Luann over in Murfreesboro will train you one-on-one at the courthouse if you don't go when they schedule a training, or when an organization like the NAACP or the League of Women Voters schedule a day. So it's open to any registered voter. So you have to be registered to vote in order to register other people to vote, right?
Mm-hmm. And to become an election judge?
Yes.
Looks like there's another question. If hospitalized 14 days before the election, can you make arrangements to vote while in the hospital?
I do not know the answer to that. I do know since COVID in Jackson County, they have had curbside voting for people who, let's say, may have been infected with COVID. So instead of going into the poll, you could drive your car around and they would let you register that way. But in the hospital, I'm not sure how that can work, but if you call the Jackson County Courthouse and talk to Frank Bird's office, they could answer that question for you.
Great. Oh, here's another one. To be an election judge, no training required. If you are trained, you receive the higher stipend. Training is usually offered 1 or 2 times before the election, no individual training. So that's for the election judge, I think, not the registrar.
Okay, when you say no individual, it's a group training, but you have to be trained. And the higher stipend would go not to all the election judges, but to the 2 who actually drive the ballots over to the courthouse. If that's the question, that's how that works.
Mm-hmm. Another question, how do people vote who are in nursing homes?
That's a good question. I know, and I don't know if all of the nursing homes or assisted living facilities is a separate poll, but I do know, like, I think Carbondale Towers, that's a poll there. Otherwise, that may be something that the county clerk needs to look into.
Right. Well, I'm looking on the website now, and it says if you cannot visit a polling place on election day, you can request a vote by mail ballot. So maybe people who aren't able to leave could request a vote by mail ballot. But of course, that wouldn't be if you were in the hospital, because that wouldn't be, right beforehand. So.
Right. As a matter of fact, I think I saw on the Jackson County website where you can apply to be a permanent vote by mail person. Are you looking at the website now, Jennifer? Do you see that?
I am. Let me see if I see that.
I think I was on recently and I saw that you can request. And then you wouldn't have to do it every year. You would.
I'm looking. There's a few different places to look. So I might just put the website here in the chat.
Okay. I'm pretty sure I saw that on there. And it would make sense if you're permanent resident of a nursing home that you wouldn't have to fill that application out every year. But let me thank everyone for attending, and we will do our conversation the third Tuesday in September, and Dr. Randolph Burnside will be back to talk about, he'll lead the discussion around issues that we need to consider when we vote in November. I know last month someone had a question about the home rule in Carbondale, and so that will be an issue that will be discussed next month.
Great. Thank you so much. This was very informative.
Good. Thank all of you. And on behalf of the Carbondale Branch NAACP and the Black Graduate Greek Council of Carbondale, good night.